Hello, I'll just check my name. I'm Patrick Fenner from DefProc Engineering, and also the initiator for Things That Were at Liverpool. So I get to go on first because I get to leave earliest because my train goes furthest. We are we're a small design engineering company based out of Liverpool. So we do the initial concept, the kind of the prototyping, and then the creation out from that. So some of what we've been doing is around IoT. We've been doing some stuff with LoRaWAN and with some NB-IoT. And when LoRaWAN initially came up, or the Things Network came up, it looked like a really good direction for us to be able to follow and try and understand how it was working and how we could use it, and be able to go out from there. So we started the Things Network Liverpool. Apparently, you just take the Things Network logo and you add your own city to the bottom of it, and that's about all the logo thing is. So I actually can't remember how I came across LoRaWAN initially, because it was a couple of years ago now. But certainly the first time I had a gateway is that we were doing some production work for Flood Network. Originally based out of Oxford, but now they cover everywhere. Doing some work over in the Calder Valley now. So we were asked to be able to build some sensors for them and be able to test. So they let us have a gateway because they were going on to Things Network, they were going on to LoRaWAN. So we have had a gateway now for about 2 years. We needed something we could be able to test against, and despite the fact I didn't really have any devices, I was excited enough that I made a tweet for it. So that's 17th of March, 2 years ago. So 2 years and 2 days since we were first live with that first gateway, and we have had basically continuous coverage from that point forwards from the middle of Liverpool. You can see I was so excited I'd got LoRa in the tweet instead of LoRaWAN because I didn't really understand what the difference was between the two of them. And I was quite pleased to see it was retweeted by almost everybody in Liverpool at that time. Although I should have made the number of actual retweets longer. Yeah. Like I say, I didn't have any devices other than those ones I was building. The ones I was building, I was loading code that somebody else had written, and we were just checking that it got out to the network and seemed to work all right. So I got the kind of most rudimentary approach, but what I did was go across to, Flood Network, thanks, across to Wuthering Bytes, sort of mid-2016, to be able to do a workshop on LoRaWAN and on the Things Network to be able to kind of get access to a device, put that device on the network. So that was with Andrew Lindsay of Thingnovations. So we were then, we got an Arduino Shield that he built, which had got one of the RN2483 radios on it, and we were quite happily setting that up. We were doing temperature sensing, and we were sending that kind of from the top of Headland Bridge right down to the bottom. Really nice. At the end of that, I bought the Shield off it to be able to take it home, which he seemed a little bit surprised about. And then, especially when I said, well, that one works, going to take two, and he was like, really? Okay. Took it back to my office, bearing in mind that we got a gateway there we'd never really used very much, and I was really pleased that when I plugged that device in, then the same sort of data started streaming out to the same location on the internet without me having to have done anything at all. And it kind of suddenly had that magical thing that Wi-Fi's never quite managed to do, that you could just move this device, it could see another gateway somewhere else in the UK. The gateway itself was completely transparent, it passed it through, the data appeared, I got that the same way I was getting it before, and that kind of seemed to just work, which was kind of lovely. So at that time, the Things Network Kickstart was running. So I went off to the Makerspace mailing list, where I'm working out of, and I said, I think this is a really good idea. I think we should have a gateway and a Hackspace. Does anybody want to chip in for 300 quid for a gateway and a set of kit and stuff like that? But it was a Makerspace mailing list, so nobody actually answered that. It all disappeared off down. Oh, we could do this, and oh, we need this building here, and oh, we could do that. So eventually, I looked at it and went, yeah, it's 300 quid. I can afford 300 quid. I put that one down, and then started the waiting, because it's Kickstarter, so you don't quite get the same dopamine response as Amazon Prime. So then there wasn't the gateways available necessarily. There were some expensive ones, sort of £1,200, which I definitely couldn't go for. There weren't really nodes available, so I suddenly started looking around like, how can I get access to this earlier? How can I try things out? How can I play with it? So I then ended up going down the route of building a gateway, and because we do a lot of Arduino work, building an Arduino shield to be able to put radios on and be able to work from there. So, sort of distilled kind of from the online guides of how do you build a Raspberry Pi based gateway and how do you put this together and how do you run it. And my approach was that as an engineer day to day, what I want to do is kind of categorize it, like what is every single bit that I need to be able to make this gateway? Where do I go and get it? How do I put it together? How do I program it? How do I make sure it's maintained and updated and things like that? So this is a Raspberry Pi based gateway with an iMist IC880C inside of it. And then I could get a full outdoor gateway with an antenna, with all of the bits for it and everything for under £500 cost for parts at the time. Actually, they have come down slightly since then. And I could get it at £500 for everything up to the bolts that you're going to put it on the wall with, which was quite nice. So that shopping list, going through that build process, although as it was pointed out today, the build process isn't actually online, even though I have all the pictures, I know how to build it. So I have to add that one on. But I did have a thing that I never wanted to go up a post to be able to fix a software problem. So it was also about how do you get access to that remotely, how do you remote update it, how do you make sure if you've got problems. So we went through a whole kind of Ansible deployment from plain Raspbian to being able to do remote access, which actually switching to OpenVPN rather than SSH access directly, and then even a backup XSH over Tor hidden service, so that even if all the other things fell down, I got a really slow kind of way to get back to it. And we added in kind of graphing and remote monitoring and things like that, because it's always nice to know why it's gone wrong after it's gone wrong, and to have had that data. So that first gateway went up about 12 months ago, give or take, so somewhere around late February, early March last year. And then I built in total about 6 of those altogether. They're all named after things that you can see over the Mersey, so I got 4 of them named after the flights that go across the Mersey, so Typhoon, Hawk, Tornado and Hercules, and then some up in, or a pair that were set to go up in Crosby that are named after wading birds, just, you know, got to call them something. This one is not doctored like the tweet, but I was surprised to see the other day when I went and checked the number of received messages on there. So in 12 months, that's done more than 250,000 LoRaWAN packets. And I have no idea who's sending those, because it's definitely not me. But that's sat there in the middle of Liverpool, so it's in L1. It's not particularly fantastically placed. It's on the 4th floor, but it's inside the building on one side, and it's kind of a U-shaped building, so it's shielded on 2 sides. It looks quite nicely across the Mersey, but if you try and go the other side of the building, it drops out at about kind of 300 meters, something like that. So I got gateways, and I got that all set up, and I could be able to send messages through them. They sat really nicely. This one even got some ad hoc power cycle testing when somebody was plugging stuff in that kept tripping the electrics in the room. They'd moved it out of the main room, put it in the spare room because there was nothing plugged in there, and then give it like 10 power cycles over about an hour or something like that, and it came up every time, and it's been doing really nice. So we also had to build kind of shields to be able to go with that. So this is an Arduino shield. Like the gateway, we've tried to do it open source, so this is actually forked from an earlier version, and we've tried to do things like being able to choose which serial ports you can connect to, depending on which Arduino you connect in. So you can have it set to the same ones as the Things Network shields, or you can have it the same as the GSM shield would be normally when you put it on Arduino. We've got level converters and things, so it'll work happily with the 5 volts or the 3 volts converters. And then we're matching the reference layout for the radio side of that, so there shouldn't be any problems there.
Just explain what a shield is.
So as a drop-on board to go on top of an Arduino, so microcontroller that you tell what to do, and then a shield is any kind of daughter board that you would put on top of that to expand its functionality. In this case, being able to talk to a LoRaWAN radio that goes just here with an antenna out there, so that you can tell it to send data through the Things Network. And we built those so that we could do a hack day, because I could see, while I knew what was going on, part of my job then as the initiator is to be able to go out and explain it to other people and go and talk to them and show them how to be able to get on the network. So I built kits so that I could then use that in a hack day take people through it and be able to let them get some data out. I heard talk before about different directions in hack days and things like that. One of the things we found was that nobody really knew what to do with the Things Network or with LoRaWAN. They didn't know what it was for. So as we were sort of talking to them, really what we did was just in that first day was go through, put the temperature sensor on the basis that temperature sensing is the hello world of sensors. Take a temperature reading and display it, then add the LoRaWAN in, be able to send it over to the Things Network, see that come through the other side, see what the payload decoder looks like, so then suddenly you get some numbers out of it. And then we actually passed that through to my device's Cayenne, because it had got a nice dashboard where you could get numbers out of it really quickly, and then how do you then pass that into something else like Node-RED, so you could start making bigger decisions on it or recording it, things like that. And everybody in that day then got through, at least to the Cayenne, my devices, a few of them got onto the Node-RED, and then suddenly at the end of that they could see how do I use that particular connection instead of what I'm used to, like I've got an ESP, I've got Wi-Fi, or why do I have a mobile phone, I have a mobile modem so I can use mobile data, or I've got Bluetooth, why wouldn't I just use Bluetooth? I was pleased to get to be able to go to the Things conference this year, the first one of those, by volunteering, not by paying for tickets, because it was kind of expensive. One of the big things that I got out of that is that the tech side of this is basically sorted. Whereas even 12 months ago, things weren't widely available, modems were in short supply. I was buying European modems from Mouser in the US just to be able to get some in time. You've got there's a couple of different condenser boards for Raspberry Pis, so you could realistically build indoor gateways under £200. There's at least 4 outdoor gateway manufacturers which can connect to the Things Network comfortably. The Things Network itself has its own gateway that you can buy next day from Farnell and have it turn up and go. And there are, I've no idea how many node modules there are, how many radio modules there are. But yeah, whole boards from $10 up, although it's entirely possible to get less than that. But the key that I could see, and the thing that I certainly want to do as an initiator going forwards, is to explain to people who aren't technical what the point is, like what it's useful for. To go out and be able to explain to kind of business people or politicians or potential users why they need LoRaWAN, why they need access to the Things Network instead of what they're normally doing. I spoke to a sales director at one of these firms and he was saying it's like Bluetooth 10 years ago. Now people go, oh, I don't want Bluetooth in my chips. But 10 years ago, nobody knew what it was, and they were having to explain. It's this new kind of radio system. You use it in this particular circumstance. It's good for these kind of things. So, I was in the other day, needed a humidity monitor for a dry box that I'm keeping some components into it, and it was easy enough to be able to run up a board and then sit it there. It's one of Rocket Scream's boards. It's got really low energy use on it, so it's like 45 microamp sleep current and a 500 milliamp hour little LiPo battery. It should do about 400 or 500 days, something like that, running 15-minute sends. And I have a nice little dashboard, and that took me about 4 hours from start to finish to put together, which was quite nice. But I then need to find ways to be able to use LoRaWAN and move it out from that. And we were quite pleased that at the beginning of last week, we were able to announce that Liverpool's 5G testbed, one of the 5 testbeds around the UK, and we were one of the consortium partners for that. So we will be deploying push-to-talk service, which is LoRaWAN connected devices, and it's about combating social isolation. So Liverpool specifically was about health and social care. So in push-to-talk, an isolated elderly person pushes a button, gets a phone call, and that puts them through to somebody else who could also just press the button and just got a phone call. So rather than having them talk back to a centralized service, you get the people who are isolated to be able to talk to each other. But when we initially tried that, we were doing kind of Ethernet connected buttons and plugging them into routers and things. And about half of the elderly isolated people don't have broadband, or they don't have a router in the corner and things like that. So that was a particular problem. But because as part of this testbed, we've got the funding to be able to put up 10 LoRaWAN gateways to cover Liverpool, that then means that we can pretty much guarantee access to that and to access to all those areas and be able to place them to be able to cover those areas nicely. We're sticking with Things Network though, because to be honest, it's about the best developed back end. It's certainly the kind of longest running one, really nice and stable, and seems to have proved itself. The free traffic is a really good bit of that. I'm quite happy to not pay anything for transfer costs in running the service, but also that cooperation increases the value for any of the participants in the network. So if anybody else puts gateways up, we get to use those as well, and anybody else wanting to use devices gets to use our gateways, and it functionally costs nothing extra. But hopefully as part of that project, that will then mean that we will be the first LoRaWAN gateways in the world with a 5G backhaul, because that's
crazy.
Yeah, low latency. It's all about low latency. Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. If you do want to have a chat with me, I am going about 8 o'clock to be able to get the correct train. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.